Start the show. The Good Life with DT. It's Nicole. Welcome to the Good Life.
You are now listening to the Good Life Podcast.
Good Life. Good Life. These boys are crazy.
You are now listening to the Good Life Podcast.
Good Life. What?
Oh boy, what's up, Spicoli?
Yo, what's poppin', DT?
Chilling, man. Just got back from the China buffet.
Ooh, yikes.
It was dog shit. I hate
Ah, well, you said it.
it. No 5-star review for the China buffet from DT.
I don't even know if I want to get into that review. I don't even know.
No,
I mean, maybe I
stay
do.
away, bro.
Maybe that's for another day. But look, I'm so glad that we have found my man, Michael Clark from Arasing. He was in a band. Dude, you were in the scene for so long. I think it was 80 years.
It feels like it, man. It feels like it. It was a long time. And then, I've been done with it almost as long as I was in it. And that's the crazy part.
That's nuts, dude. I feel the same way, man. Yeah, I was in music for a long time, and shit, dude. Yeah, it's about the same time. It's crazy.
So
Yeah.
you were in between both scenes. You were like in Des Moines, Iowa. You were also in Omaha, Nebraska. You were kind of somewhere in the middle. And eventually, one time, your band opened up for Slipknot. How does that work out?
So if we were to kind of take my story and backtrack it without retreading everything, I got started doing local regional music seriously probably 1997, 1998. And I lived at the perfect midpoint between Des Moines and Omaha. Just through association, going to Slipknot shows in Des Moines, I ended up opening up for them April 18th, 1998, shortly after Corey Taylor had joined the band, right before they went off and recorded their debut album with Ross Robinson. And kind of following that, I had like a year of inactivity where the band I was in at the time had fallen apart, and I wanted to put something new together. And it really was one of those things where I'm like, okay, I can move to Des Moines, and everybody in Des Moines at the time was trying to be a Slipknot clone. And I say that respectfully, or I can move to Omaha where I have a lot more opportunities at diversity. There was everything and anything happening at Omaha at the time. So fortunately, I chose Omaha and then kind of became, or at least lived a storied history of local bands from there.
What was your band name again? I'm sorry.
So after moving to Omaha, I was in a band called 3/4 Evil that became 3QE. And then 3QE transitioned to Reagan Era. Reagan Era broke up. I was in a band for about a year called Right Side Impact. And then Arasing started in 2007, 2008.
So we're talking...
And we kept going.
Like Ranch Bowl days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the funny thing. I have seen many a kingdom rise and many a kingdom fall in my time in local music. So, yeah.
Man, for the longest time, I wanted to do like a Ranch Bowl reunion concert in that Walmart parking lot. I just wanted to get fucking Extend and LD50 and all those old school bands, man. Let's just get a stage out in Walmart's parking lot and go at it.
I know, you stand in the sporting goods department and think of all the deplorable things you saw happen on those very grounds.
Right. Which local band, in your opinion, in the Ranch Bowl days went the hardest?
Are you talking about just in general?
Yeah, just in general, that brought the crowd, that went absolutely nuts, where you saw things that you didn't even think were possible at a live show.
Well, let's take it from the Disney vantage point, where I won't go totally morally corrupt. The band that I thought in the heat of the Ranch Bowl days was going to be on Warner Brothers any day was Pomeroy. They could sell out a Tuesday night. They could sell out a Tuesday night with an overflowing toilet and shit all over the floor, and people would still come watch them, right? So from those days, I would say Pomeroy, and it was kind of a transition because you saw Clever and Pomeroy in the height of it from like 2000 to 2002, and then you saw Vernaculars, and then eventually Emphatic, and a lot of bands kind of came and went when the Ranch Bowl ultimately closed in 2005. So a lot happened in that 5-year span of time to where it felt like, man, that felt more like a decade and a half than it did 5 years.
I guess I kind of moved here in 2000. So, but was Pomeroy from here?
No, they were originally from Manhattan, Kansas.
Okay.
And Kansas City.
That's what I thought.
But they lived here. They lived here for about a year and a half because the Ranch Bowl had a recording studio in the back of the building and their own record label called Get Go Records. And they were recording what eventually became Cocoon Club, and they were trying to farm that out to major record labels. Like I said, it was not a matter of if, it was a matter of when. And I'm just shocked it never came to fruition. I know I'm supposed to talk to David Fairbanks on my podcast sometime in the near future. I want to unlock the mystery of the shit we don't know about, because there's a lot of folklore surrounding that band.
Yeah,
that would be very interesting.
Yeah, man, they really did bring a crowd back in the day with the Pomeroy, the Eskimo pie hits you right between the eye. I mean, that song just had people in a chokehold. And to see them live and perform it, like, that was special. Everybody talked about those shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the craziest thing I think about the Ranch Bowl, though, beside from all the history there, like, you know, with Pearl Jam and Red Hot Chili Peppers and Linkin Park and Cottonmouth Kings and Two Skinny Jays and all those guys playing there, was that fact that somebody lived up in the rafters for a hot minute. That's the crazy thing.
That is crazy.
Dude, the thing was, if you ever got the opportunity to kind of walk some of the back hallways and stuff, there was infinite amounts of little rooms all in these back hallways, like in particularly between Matthew's Pub and the actual bowling lanes themselves, where several bands had rehearsal spaces all through there, and you wouldn't know it from the outside. It was like an endless labyrinth of little coves and such, and I think more than one person lived there at a time.
How weird, dude. Man,
yeah.
I can only, like I said, I came towards the end of the Ranch Bowl days, man, so you guys know way more than I do, but I mean, yeah, like, I'm trying to think, like Haven 21 and Vernaculars. That's kind of when I showed up, man. I went to my first concert ever at the Ranch Bowl. It was Flaw. It was on my 16th birthday.
Nice. One of my most memorable Ranch Bowl shows that I remember going to, it was on 4th of July weekend, and it was Cottonmouth Kings and Zebrahead.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I was going to see Zebrahead. Well, there was this little band that opened the show, and hardly anybody was there to see them, and it was a band called Linkin Park.
How fucking crazy is that?
Like, but the thing is there are infinite stories like that about the Ranch Bowl. Like, everybody has their own version of that story.
Yeah, mine's the Used. That's my story from the Ranch Bowl, was the Used. I remember that. They were out hanging out with us in the bowling alley. Disconnected opened up for them. And I don't think anybody really knew who they were at the time.
I think I remember that show.
Weird dude.
I remember that show because I think Audio Vent played on that show too. And if you remember who Audio Vent was, I've actually had them on my show. That's the guitarist and singer of Incubus. It's their younger brother's band.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, when I think of like the Used, I think of like when they first came out, this Taste of Ink is getting, and him dating Ozzy Osbourne's daughter, Kelly, and Kelly now married to the dude from Slipknot, which, what a wild turn of events.
Yeah, for sure.
That's so crazy.
For sure.
What got you into podcasting then?
So it's, it kind of has its own trajectory to it. You know, I stopped doing the band thing in 2011. Like I said, Aura Sing was the last project I was a part of. And to be honest, that was a very fulfilling and nice creative end to my musical journey. So you fast forward about 9 years. I've had infinite number of friends tell me, oh, you'll be back into music. You'll be back into music. And I really made peace with it. And I was like, I'm okay. You know, I'm okay with walking away from it. But you don't have a 15-year history in the music business or attempting to be in the music business without making a ton of connections. So the heat of the pandemic, I was bored off my ass. Like most people, I was knocked off of all of my routines. I felt the heavy weight of the other pandemic setting in, the mental health pandemic. And I was like, I have to do something for myself. I have to do something creative again, but it's got to be tenable. It's got to be something that I can do while being a good career man, being a good family man, paying attention to my kids. I've made all these great connections, and not just in the music world, but so many other versatile avenues. Why not start a podcast? So I started my podcast in September of 2020. Did about 9 episodes, and I was like, all right, we're going to get together. We're going to record episodes face to face. And I got about 9 episodes in, and I'm like, wait a minute, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. That feels a little fucking irresponsible. So when I started doing things remote, that's when the floodgates opened. And, here I am. I'm about 125 episodes in, and I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. And to be honest with you, I have not said this publicly, but it is almost more fulfilling than all of my years doing music.
Dude, I agree 100% with that, man. 100% I agree with that. And I saw some of the guests you had on, and it was like, I had never heard of it until Spicoli brought it up to me, but I kind of started ours out the same way. I was like, I'm going to go after, UFC fighters and this and that. And then my big goal was like, just like you, I was like, man, let's use my connections and let's get some bands on here that I love, man, and see how far we can take this thing. So it's kind of crazy. We did the same path, man. That's nuts to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when I started off, of course, I'm sure you guys have immersed yourselves in it as well. There's a lot of podcasting communities on the internet. Some are better than others. I have learned that I hate 90% of the Facebook podcast groups. But
yes.
Everybody is a life coach apparently. But one of the things I had said to me was, hey, if you don't niche down your podcast is going to fail. You need to focus on one thing and do that one thing really good. And even Gary Vee has made a video that has said the same thing. And the thing is like, man, I don't want to just talk to this one subset of people. I want to be able to talk to everybody. So the thing that I decided I was going to do really well was tell people stories. It didn't matter what avenue of life that they came from. So I had a stand-up comic tell me one time he would call my podcast a combination of Paul Harvey meets Joe Rogan without getting political.
I actually, one of my friends was on your podcast. I saw that. So, he goes by, I think, Lavetti Vegas, but
yeah.
That's the stage name. So I saw he was on there.
Yep.
Like, oh shit. All right.
Yep.
Then you had you had one of my favorite dudes on there recently. I don't know if it's aired yet, but Ryan Key from Yellow Card. I'm looking forward to listening to that.
Yeah, that was a fun conversation, and it was okay. I don't know how open I should be about this, but I was talking back and forth with his publicist for weeks. And I'm like, all right, I've been trying. He was like on my top 10. Everybody, I'm sure you guys have it too, like a top 10. These are 10 people I have to have on at some point in the podcast. Yep. He was in my top 10 as far as the music column went. And, I had Adam Russell from Story of the Year on, who is Ryan's podcast co-host on their Thank the Maker Star Wars podcast. And Adam was fucking awesome. That's probably, pardon my language, but that was probably one of my more favorite episodes because we barely talked about Story of the Year. We talked about podcasting. We talked about nostalgia. We talked about, why everybody's getting into vinyl all of a sudden. And it was a great conversation. And I kind of wanted to recreate that with Ryan. So I say all of that to say that I'd been going back and forth with Ryan's publicist forever, and it just didn't seem like it was going to happen. Coincidentally, Longinu Parsons, who's the former drummer of Yellow Card, has just gotten really active on social media. So I reached out to his management team and he did my podcast about a week and a half ago. I get done recording this episode. Mind you, I have no stake in whatever happened between Yellow Card and Longinu or whatever. I'm Switzerland, man. I'm like, you know what I mean? But I get done recording that episode, and that publicist for Ryan emails me back the next day. Hey, Ryan's got some time this Thursday. Do you want to record? I'm like, so right now I am kind of, it hasn't dropped yet. So I'm kind of in one of those tailspins where I like my episodes to have a connective tissue or like a spiritual connectivity, but not be repetitive. So I'm trying to make a few episodes happen here so I can put a little bit of distance between the two, so it's not overly repetitive. Right. But it was a great conversation. Long-winded explanation, but
No, was it about Star Wars or was it about music or a little bit of both?
So we talked about the recent release that Yellowcard did with Hammock. Okay. Ryan is very, to me, and this is just from my perception, he is very entrenched in instrumental music. Like, I don't know how many more Yellowcard albums of new material we're going to see in the infinite future, but his ultimate goal is to start scoring films and creating soundscapes. And I think this Hammock project, this collaborative album that they just dropped, is kind of a bridge to that. And so that was a lot of what the episode was about. We just talked about that.
Okay, that's interesting, because if you're a Yellowcard fan, like, you want the Ocean Avenue and the Only One and Tiny Apartment and all that kind of stuff. So it's very it's unique that they're heading that direction. I guess I listened to it and I was like, and I love Yellowcard, like one of my favorites, and it just, I don't know, I couldn't get into it as much.
That first album, dude, is hard to top, man. That's, I mean, even after, that's the only album. If you say Yellowcard, I think of that album, honestly. I mean, it's very hard to top what they did on the Ocean Avenue album. It's almost impossible, dude.
I think anytime you put a band in a position where they have to create something organically and their life depends upon it, that's usually when you're going to get the best material. What I understand of the Yellowcard, the Ocean Avenue album, is they basically went away, locked themselves in a house for a period of time, and wrote that album from time up till time to bed every single day. And they were still like doing side gigs, and like they hadn't made it yet. And there's a certain level of stakes that go with that you're not going to get on the second big album, the third big album. Yeah. And I think that's why some bands over time start to sound like they're just going through their motions and trying to recreate that energy that sometimes just can't be recreated.
That's a great way of putting it, because, like, you have high expectations once you hear that album, and it becomes quickly your favorite, and then you can't wait to hear their next stuff, and their next stuff is like, it's not the same.
Plus, that genre of music they're in, dude, I mean, there were so many bands that were doing that. I mean, Simple Plan, I mean, dude, Good Charlotte. I mean, those guys were putting out albums back to back that were just fucking bangers, dude. Right. And they just figured it out, Newfound Glory. I mean, there's tons of them, but Yellowcard's Ocean Avenue, I mean, that one stands the test of time, dude. They could play that album still. I mean, they still do. They still go out and tour that album. That's how good it was. So,
and you have to think about what has happened since then. The advent of social media, like MySpace blowing up in 2005, 2006, and then Facebook going fully public like in 2009, 2010, that divided a lot of people's attention. And, streaming sites now, how they've blown up in the past 5, 6, 7 years, that divides people's attention even further. So people aren't making the big albums that they used to. And if you're paying attention to how people even release music, and you guys know this, they're releasing it a single at a time and they're trickling the album out. Yeah. Because 9 times out of 10, they're not finishing songs until they see the response to the last one they released.
What's your opinion on that, Mike? What do you like better? Do you like, I miss the albums, to be honest with you.
I do too.
I miss being able to go through a whole album.
Yeah, I do too. I've gone over that. Actually, I just had Rob Harvilla from 60 Songs That Explain the 90s on my show. And we actually talked about that. And I do too. I miss a story being told, because an album tells a story, and how we as listeners interpret that album, we apply that story to our own lives. But when you're only releasing it at a single at a time, you've forgotten about that song by the time the next song comes out, as opposed to revisiting that song because you were forced to, like in the album format.
Yeah, and then they just take all the singles and then release it as an album, and you're like, dude, well, we fucking heard them all already.
Right.
What are you doing?
Yeah, you've almost exhausted it.
Yeah, right. But yeah, that's probably one of our biggest talking points with almost every guest we have on. You release an album or a single? Oh, I think we're gonna do singles. And me and Scully go, fucking shocked that you said that. Like everybody's doing
right.
that, man.
And plus, and also, it seems like what we've noticed is it's from a financial standpoint. You know, it's like you get in the studio, you do one song, you do it really good, then you promote it on TikTok, then you try to get it on the radio, and whatever you can work the most out of that song. You know, if you can get 5 or 6 months out of that and make some money off of it, make some money back, then you're doing good. But to throw it back to like the album where it just tells a story and you open it up, or like you just stream it or whatever, there's something to be said about that story that just flows so well, you know.
So shout out to Story of the Year for releasing that new album, by the way, after they came on the podcast, dude. Holy shit. I got to go see them live, dude, performing the new shit. Oh, dude. That whole set. It's amazing.
Fortunately, they had that whole album done before they started dropping singles out because Adam and I had the same exact conversation where I said, so what does your release schedule for this look like? And he goes, well, we're going to drop a song here. We're going to wait a couple of months. We're going to drop another song or two here. And that's what they did. And they made videos for almost every single one of those, 4 or 5 singles that they released within that 6 month window of time. So that was smart. It was kind of blending the old with the new to a certain degree.
Yeah, they found that fountain of youth. That album just, oh man, it just rips. I love that album from front to back. They nailed it.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Up in the castle, evil mischief stirs.
Plan number 42. I shall turn myself into a cat and get adopted by the butcher's daughter so I can learn all her secrets. Then, I will use them to make her fall in love with me. What do you think, Wilson?
Hey, check out 1v1 Me DM on all podcast platforms to see more of Dracula's perfect plans at finding true love.
Yeah, is War not the best song ever? That is my most favorite song on that
Dude,
album.
when they did that shit live, so I had to drive down to Lawrence, Kansas to go see them, but it was totally worth it. They like hooked us up with meet and greets and all that, dude. So, but I think they played War probably halfway through the set, and it like reignited the entire venue, dude, and it was so badass. Unfortunately, they played Spicoli's favorite song at the meet and greet. They didn't play it during the show. That 2005,
but
it was dope.
I love 2005. It makes me think nostalgia. It makes me think Ranch Bowl. It makes me miss those days. And the first time I heard it, I got misty-eyed, dude. I'm like, man, they are throwing it back. It felt right.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me turn the tables on you guys just for a moment. What is your opinion of nostalgia? Do you think we are in a pendulum moment where nostalgia is like walking down this tightrope, and it on one side of the tightrope it's really good and it's amazing, and on the other side of the tightrope it could be like a depressive trigger for people? Because I think in this post-pandemic world we are really hyper fixated on nostalgia, and I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think it can be dangerous from time to time. What are your guys' opinions on that?
That's super interesting. I never thought of it.
Yeah,
that
I
way.
I just think nostalgia. I think
Dr. Mike was coming on.
Mike, are you high, dude? I don't think that deep.
No, man.
I will say, man, yeah, there's a lot of pop punky stuff coming back. There's a lot of new metals coming back. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff coming back. Yeah, and I don't know. I wouldn't say it's depressing to me though at all. I think it's fucking awesome, dude.
Well,
but I guess I'm
not
getting
saying
older. Do you know what I mean?
There you go. That's not what I was. I'm not lending it to the idea that it depresses you, but it can be a trigger to where you almost fixate on times past instead of looking through that windshield. You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of people from our generation particularly sometimes really struggle moving forward because they're so hyper fixated on everything that came before it.
I guess there's a lot of 20-year anniversaries from what we used to love coming up. So I think we finally realized, like, shit, man, we're starting to get older, man.
Yeah, but I also appreciate the balance in it. You know, I can appreciate the nostalgia and going back and looking at it, but we also love a bunch of new music, and we don't sleep on new artists. So I feel like we get the right dose of each, both to keep us, like, excited for the older stuff, like the nostalgia, like the Story of the Year and the Yellow Card, and then keeping it fresh and new with, like, Swaco, bands like that, you know, and Sixth Century, other bands that we've had on that, you know, get me really excited.
Yeah, and I think that's something you guys do incredibly well, is introducing people that might be familiar with the old to the new, because that moment you guys had with Swaco was dope.
Yeah.
It was absolutely dope.
Yeah, that was probably, I'd say that's probably one of the highlights of the podcast. You talk about the live show or on the podcast? Which one are you talking about?
Both,
oh,
man.
Yeah.
It all correlates.
The live show was crazy, dude. That was, we were walking out to leave, man, and I was like, oh, there's Swaco at his table. And we walked over, there was a whole group of people, and that dude knew exactly who we were immediately. So it's a good feeling.
Yeah,
man.
it was a good feeling for that to come together. And, you know, I mean, you know how hard it is to get the guests and then commit to a time. And it almost with Swaco didn't happen. And I was like, David, you got to stay patient, man. I've been in radio a long time, where sometimes artists can't make it and things pop up, and you know, you stay patient and you don't want to lose those connections, and you try to work on another time. And fortunately, the next time it worked out, and he was able to come on, and we had, you know, really great conversation with him. And the fact that he spilled some stuff, like, on the podcast that we weren't expecting, and was talking about some of the new music he was going to drop, and then he remembered us when we got to the show. I mean, that's the connection between, you know, the host of a podcast and the host of, like, a radio show. Just building that relationship with the artist, and being able to do ticket giveaways and get them to meet their favorite artists. I mean, that stuff is what it's all about. It's like connecting everybody together on something cool, you know?
Yeah, and that's my most favorite part of it as well. Like, there is something that seems super, super, super genuine about the podcasting environment that you might not find anywhere else in the world, because these are genuine conversations. These are guys that you're sitting around the bar and shooting the shit with, and, like, the best of times, the worst of times, what's going to happen next, you know? That's one of my most favorite things about it, is that relationship building as well. Like, somebody gives you their time, they're giving you the greatest gift in the world. Right? Yeah. Like, somebody can pay you $1 million. You could go out and spend that $1 million and have the opportunity to earn that $1 million back at some point in time. Somebody gives you their time. They're not getting that time back. So it's huge.
Yeah, we definitely tried to take advantage of everything we get. What's been your favorite, like, thing that's happened for your podcast that's, I guess, resonated into, like, outside the podcast? Have you had anything cool happen like that?
Nothing specific. I had some weird thing happen with my day job. I don't talk about my day job on my podcast at all. Like, I try and keep that life completely disconnected, because the last thing I need is some asshole at a corporate office calling me up saying, yo, and it's come close a couple times, but I did have somebody call me up one time at my day job, and they're like, man, your voice is really familiar. What did you say your name was? And I was like, oh shit. And it was somebody that was entrenched in the MMA world that had found me through a lot of the fighters that I'd had on the show. So that was kind of crazy. Like, a lot of little things like that. I think the big thing is the relationship building. I try not to get too hyper focused on goals. Instead, I focus on processes. Yeah. And I know this is gonna kind of sound a little preachy as well, Dr. Mike coming back out to play, but I'm in my second pass of listening through Atomic Habits, and one of the rules he sets up in Atomic Habits is if you focus on the processes, the goals will take care of itself. So I'm always looking for ways to better my show and to elevate it up, and usually it ends up working out. And opportunities like the one I had with Ryan Key just this last week tend to present themselves, and the world is whole again for me.
Do you see yourself ever having a co-host, or do you like to work solo?
I don't know. That's kind of, it kind of goes back to the same thing. It's like, that would be me kind of setting a goal for the show. I think for the time being, I'm okay with working solo. I would love to have somebody that could like produce and edit, so I wasn't spending so much time on it. Because I tell you, because I got to tell you, like, as I'm sure you guys can relate, the hardest part of podcasting isn't recording the podcast. It's guest acquisition, it's editing, it's piecing it together and making it something that you are proud of after it's all said and done. And, you know, I'm a one-man army right now. So could I have a co-host at some point in time? Yeah, I would almost rather have my Hey Jamie guy off to the side. But
yeah.
Maybe that's just my ego. But
yeah, this is the easy part, man. This is the fun part. After this, before and after this, that's shitty kind of, man. I mean, it's fun, but it's stressful and it's hard. Dude, I mean, do you know how many people have been like, hey, man, can you give me that connection to that guest you have on? I'm like, fuck no, dude. Like,
right.
Do you know how much work that takes, man? Like, do you know how, I don't think people don't get it, man.
No. And that's the thing. I mean, and if you do have a big get, like, it's the prophecy of what happens whenever you're promoting a good product. You have somebody really good, somebody that everybody's interested in on your show, then everybody crawls out of the woodwork. It's what you want, but not everybody that crawls out of the woodwork is someone you want crawling out of the woodwork. So it's the same exact shit it's the same exact shit.
You know what's stupid too, man, is my brother's a professional video dude, man. That's what he does for a living, and we don't do video. You know, honestly, with us, man, it's more of like, all right, if we're going to do video, we're going to do it right. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to go cheap on it. So it's like, we're going to buy the right shit. You know,
same.
And like, obviously with our podcast setup, you know, you can see the mics he's using. We're using the same. I think you're using the same one we are. Like, we went balls to the wall. Yeah.
Yes,
exactly.
I am.
We're going to sound good.
Right.
And if we're going to do video, we're going to look good. So that's kind of what we're waiting on for that. But, dude, I found out the iPhone cameras are, like, almost better than most of the cameras you can buy. Like at like that range people are using. So maybe Spicoli are going to start dabbling in that here soon.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I just started using my iPhone camera as opposed to my web camera to do online video content. Like every Sunday, I will sit down, I will record 4 or 5 1-minute videos so I have content to promote the podcast throughout the week. And I switched from using my webcam cam to using my iPhone 15 cam, and it's a lot higher quality. And unironically, my engagement's gone up since that video quality has gone up. So it's the same exact thing. And you guys having a radio background, you and me probably, maybe it's because I come from a music background, we are the one and the same. Like, we know the power of being able to edit an audio-only podcast versus a video, you know, ingrained podcast, and the value of, like, cutting out the ums and the ahs and the word repetition and like bringing out the best of our guests as well as ourselves.
Yeah, you're a couple years deep into this, and you know, also being in music and knowing like the sound quality has to be on point. And man, I mean, it does take a lot of time, and you invest a lot into it, and it is a sacrifice when you know you're doing this, and you want to do it because you're having fun. You want to do it because you want to connect with others. You want to do it because one day you might just be supporting your family with it, you know. And the amount of effort that goes into it kind of gets overlooked by people, you know. And they're like, "Man, I can do a podcast," and it takes a little bit more than just, "Oh, I can do a podcast." You know, it takes a lot of sacrifice to get
I think
right.
you're the one that told me. You're like, it's content, dude. You're like, it's fucking content. That was like his biggest thing when before he joined. That's all we talked about. We got to have the content. We got to have, and I'm like, well, we got to get the guests. And he's like, you have to have the fucking content, dude, or the guests ain't going to matter. And it finally clicked, and I'm like, all right. So it's huge, man. Yeah, dude, if people want to start a podcast, man, all for it, man. Go for it. You'll learn quick, man. It's different than what you think. It's a ton of fun, but
well, you think about who the best is at it currently, like, and who the best has been at it currently. Like, you know, socio-political bullshit aside, throw that out. But like Rogan and Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer have one of the best, funniest podcasts out there. there's an olive branch from all of those guys. You have Andrew Sortino and Bobby Lee and all of these guys that are friends of Rogan's, and they're all associated. And that kind of lends to that whole idea, you know, collaboration happens at the top, competition happens at the bottom. Like, you know, DT, you say you spent some time doing stand-up comedy. You know how viciously competitive that could be, you know? And the same thing with the local regional music scene. Like, that's the underbelly that maybe not everybody is fully honest and transparent about, is it can be pretty cutthroat at times. And so we are living in a new world where that's just not the way to make it anymore.
I know Rogan's a top dog. My favorite podcast is Smartless. Hands down is Smartless with Jason Bateman's podcast and Will Arnett and them. So you guys can see this. Where's my camera? Jason Bateman liked my comment, dude, on his podcast. I love Jason Bateman, dude. That popped up on my notifications on the Good Life page, and I was like, what the fuck, dude? So, yeah, I haven't really dug into Rogan's podcast. I know that sounds weird, but I did. This is how I can tell you that I agree that he's the best. I copied his entire setup. So my setup is Rogan's setup. That's what I was like, what does Joe Rogan use? And I Googled every piece of equipment he used, from the headphones to the Rode, to the new Rodecaster, everything. I was like, all right, that's what we're getting. I saw the price tag. I was like, fuck it, man. Let's do it.
He's all in.
See what happens.
He's all in. That's what I wanted to know, too. I was like, man, we're not just doing like some ass quality, are we? Because, you know, if people are listening to a podcast, they got to hear it clearly and concisely, and it's got to sound good. And our voices got to boom, and the headphones got to sound right. And DT was like, "Yeah, we're all in." And the first time like that I was on his podcast, I'm like,
that was so funny.
Whoa, this is way different. I'm like, this is good quality. This is solid quality. I like this quality.
But that's the thing. I mean, I kind of liken it to the last band project I did. The last band project I did, Arising, we woodshed the project for like 7 months before we even played our first show. We played our first show in Des Moines before we played our first show in Omaha, because we wanted to get shit right. And that was kind of my same mentality with the podcast. Like, the very first episode of Caught on the Mic was 2 of my past bandmates from Arising talking about the history of the band. But I had to have that sound quality perfect. Like, so I spent probably a good 24 hours worth of editing before I even released it to the world. And that was one of the best compliments I got that first week after it came out. Thank you for dialing the sound in before you released it, because so many other podcasts fucking don't.
It's tough, man.
Yeah.
So who was your first like actual guest you had on? Besides your band, I'm saying, like, who was your first one?
So let's see. So, like, that first round, I was just trying to find an identity. So that first 10 episodes, I had somebody from Lincoln Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Actually, the first one was Johnny Hauser from the Villisca Axe Murder House.
Nice.
I took all of my gear into the Villisca Axe Murder House. I set it up in the most haunted room in the house, and we had a conversation about the history of the Villisca Axe Murder House. And then it kind of just cascaded down from that. I think my turning point was right around episode 15. I had Anthony Lionheart Smith from the UFC on the show. You know, he's based out of Omaha. We had interacted on social media before that. And I was kind of like, okay, this shit's for real now. So, like, now it's all about vetting and, like, making sure that whoever I have on the show is a good representation of who I am as well.
I think my brother was the one that responded to his house for that break-in. My brother's a cop in Omaha. You know what I'm talking about? I'm pretty sure that was my brother.
I know
'Cause my
exactly
brother's got
which
his
one you're
sticker on
talking
the back
about.
of his car. He gave him one of his stickers, Anthony.
Oh.
I think he beat the shit out of the dude, didn't he? Yeah.
Yes, he did. Yeah. But he will, if you kind of have heard interviews with him after that had happened, he said that kind of rocked him for his fight after that, because he fought Glover Teixeira after that fight happened, and he lost. He actually lost a couple of teeth in that fight, and he just said he was mentally rattled going into that fight because of that home invasion.
That's crazy. Dude, you would think that me and you know each other. So before Spicoli joined the podcast, my idea, because it's funny you bring up the Axe Murder House thing, because I had that idea. We were talking about, I had 3 other guys on before Spicoli, and then we all split, but we were all talking about going there. But my goal I wanted to do, and I couldn't get a hold of anybody. We were trying to spend the night at Ball Cemetery and stay out there all night with the podcast gear. So I was kind of trying to do the same thing. And I ended up calling, if you've been to Ball Cemetery, there's that house out there that they say the guy chased you with the axe. So I Googled it, and I found the house, and I called the number, and the guy answered, and he goes, well, I'm not the caretaker. I just live out here. And he goes, why do you want to go out there anyways? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I mean, it's spooky as shit. It's terrifying. I've been out there multiple times. He's like, well, I just buried my wife out there last month, and I was like, "Oh fuck, dude!" Like, that just ruined everything.
Jesus,
right?
Well, it's funny because I had no intention of like dabbling in the paranormal, and I've had a lot of paranormal guests on my show. People that are in that field, and Ball Cemetery was one of my like inspirations. I had listened, and I highly encourage you to listen to it if you haven't before.
Yes,
but Unsolved Mysteries does a podcast, and they do one about Ball Cemetery. Like, my wife and I went camping one night. I put that podcast on as we were sitting around the campfire, and it was like,
yeah, dude. I made my wife listen to it.
It was so good.
That's where her family lives, and I put it on because I was like, remember that shit I was telling you about? Because I've been there like 20 times, dude. So like, I was like, I've told her all the stories.
Yeah.
I was like, Unsolved Mysteries did a podcast on it. She's like, what? So we listened to it. I was like, it does it kind of justice. You got to be out there though to really see how scary it is.
Do you guys feel that bad juju?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like,
Absolutely.
okay, you hanging out in the Villisca Axe Murder House, DT hanging out in the Ball Cemetery. Did you guys feel the ick coming home? Anything weird happen?
Yeah. Yeah. You never been to Ball Cemetery?
Yes.
No, I know better. I don't like that kind of stuff on me.
I don't see, and that's the weird thing, dude. I don't really like get like you know how I am. We had Claire on, and you know how I was like, yeah, I don't believe in this shit. And then we start talking. I'm like, I don't like this shit no more. But I don't know, man. I don't really believe in ghosts and stuff. But something about being there, yeah, it's creepy, man. But at doing a podcast, we do it for reactions and the guest reactions, right? And I think that's why I was so interested in doing it that way. Maybe the same with you, just being there. I'm like, what if something happens on this podcast? How cool is that I can catch it?
So it's funny you say that. I got home from Villisca after recording that episode, and I go to edit. There were volume spikes throughout the entire episode. I was literally editing the episode line by fucking line to try and get the volume right. And I was like, okay, maybe it's just because there was bad power because it was an extension cord running from like one of the auxiliaries or something. But yeah, I had to literally edit that episode line by line. I've got a cool one dropping this week, kind of falls in the same category. I've got it's two repeat guests, and one of them is a paranormal investigator that just got a TV show on Plex, and he just got another contract he can't make public yet, another TV show he can't make public yet. And his name is Mike Ritchie. He's from a show called Charm City Paranormal, and a medium that I've had on my show before by the name of Jackie Hilbrick. And the episode that I had her on was like 2 weeks after my dad had passed away. And she did a reading on the show, and I was like a little, I'll be honest, I was a little taken aback by her reading. I was just like, man, I wonder if she just cruised my social media and pulled up a bunch of stuff about me, and like, because people can be predatory like that. So I took the clip before I finished editing the episode. I sent it on to my brothers. My youngest brother calls me and he goes, no, Mike, you don't understand. Dad actually said all of that stuff, like word for word. And like, she has been one of the most gracious people I have ever met. So I have this episode with her and Mike from Charm City Paranormal coming out this week, where we discuss the topic of death and what happens after we die. And it's got a little bit more gravity than a normal episode would have for my show. And, I have 2 rules. I won't talk politics. I won't talk religion. But we do kind of get into the more spiritual elements of life. Yeah, absolutely. And so we kind of touch on Hinduism and Buddhism and like how all the religions kind of have similar ideologies, and it is I was super stoked after I got done editing it. I'm sure you've had these moments where you got done editing it and you're like,
Oh, yeah.
fuck yeah, that was the best ever.
Now, do it now, don't wait.
Yeah.
Mike,
Right?
talking about this just reminded me of something, man. And if you want to do, maybe we can do something cool. We can do like a team podcast, like Caught Up with a Mike and Good Life. Earlier this last summer, I messaged the Museum of Shadows, I believe is what it's called, in downtown Omaha. And they have you heard of this place? And they have all that haunted shit and spooky shit. And I was messaged the owners about doing a podcast with them. And they're like, yeah, we should in the wintertime sometime. And then we'll take you on a tour. Me and you, I'll hit them up, dude, if you want to go check it out. And I'll bring the podcast
Let's
gear.
do
We can
it,
both
man.
release it on both of our podcasts as like a team up one. That'd be fun.
That's what this is all about,
So
man.
I got to get permission
sure.
from my wife. It sounds
I'd
fun.
love
'cause I
that.
know there's some weird juju type stuff in that, but
Dude, they got some real creepy
I know
shit,
that's what
like
I'm saying.
Annabelle kind of
Like,
shit.
I just got to get
Yeah.
permission from Emily first. She doesn't like me being around that kind of stuff because she doesn't want to bring it into our house. But then, I mean, if some weird stuff happens,
Yeah.
I'll bring the pastor over and bless the house again. But I mean, that stuff just, she's like, I don't want anything latching on to you and coming into this house and you bringing that bullshit in here.
Yeah.
She keeps it honest.
My wife's the opposite. She's like, I want to go. She's like, I want to go spend the night in Ball Cemetery.
man.
But, you know, I guess if we do it and we spend the night in Ball Cemetery, we'll find out which wife is right. It's probably yours.
She's not wrong many times. I mean,
When
normally
some
she's
little girl
9
stand at the end of
times,
my
10
bed or
times,
something.
actually 10 times out of 10, she's usually right. I mean,
Yeah. We got to ask Mike one of the most important questions, man. Mike, you coming to our first concert we're putting on next month or what, bro?
Dude, what's the date again? Let's
Oh, we
plug this
plugged it
thing.
so much,
Let's
dude.
talk about
This
it.
isn't a plug. This was me legit asking. It's
Well, I mean, plug it. What's the date?
well-
I don't know the date off the top of my
Look,
mind.
we're not going to plug it, but it's March 16th at Maloney's Live in Council Bluffs. You're going to see Shim, the Impulsive, and Alieska. I didn't plug it at all, bro.
I'll try and make it for sure.
It's on us. If you come out, man, I'll get you in.
yeah, Saturday.
Oh, thanks, man.
It's on a
Yeah,
Saturday,
I will
too,
probably
Saturday,
take you up on
March
that.
16th with special guest Arasing.
Yeah, man.
Never.
I actually, dude, I got to go on a 3-day run with him. I got to go to Sioux City the night before. Then we do Council Bluffs. I call it Omaha. Council Bluffs, and then Des Moines the next night. So, yeah, man.
That's exciting.
It actually worked out to be super cool because the Impulsive are good friends of ours, man, and they actually get to do the whole run with him. They're playing live behind him. So that's the Sick Puppies backing is the Impulsive. I
Oh,
don't know
that's
if I'm allowed to
awesome.
release that. I'm going to have to find out if I'm allowed to say that. I don't know if I am.
Another ninja edit.
Yes. They come and go. Well, I feel like we're doing, man, we all are pretty much the same way. It's kind of crazy. When we first started, I think at first I was like, Spicoli, we don't write down questions. It's going to sound too interviewy. And then we tried it, and then it didn't go well. And then we wrote out like every single question, and then I was like, yeah, no, we're more on path. But now we're to the point kind of like that where we're like, all right, here's the big questions that because we have big questions each, with the artists we have coming on. And then we have like the follow-ups, and the follow-ups usually just take it
I
on
mean,
a completely
Pete,
different path.
go ahead,
so.
Spicoli. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, I was just saying, like, I feel like with interviewing people, it's like listening. I think a lot of it is coming to listen to what they're saying and following up with that, because that's when you get the good stuff. If you really listen, and for so many people, it's hard to listen, and they just want to, like, read off the sheet of paper. Here's a question I want to ask next. But if you listen with intent, you will find the good stuff with the follow-up question.
And sometimes you drop your questions as a result because someone will completely disarm you with the course that they took your line of questioning. We're like, actually, this is a more interesting story, so let's stick to this.
I think we had that happen with Story of the Year. Honestly, I think we had they told us we had 15 minutes, and I was like, shit. All right, so we had I think 5 or 8 questions, and we both had we all were lined them up, and then I think we were on there with him for 35 or 40 minutes. I went over time. I was like, guys, sorry, we went over time. Fuck it, we're having fun. We love doing this. Keep going. And I was like, oh shit, cool. So we just fucking started firing them off. Man. It was a great time.
That's the thing that I absolutely love about this art form, and I know we're kind of talking in circles to some extent about it, but that's why I love this. It's the genuine connectivity that you have with people. My vantage point is that I view every single one of us as having a very unique story that is filled with like multiple seasons. I view our lives as having multiple seasons containing multiple versions of who we are. Like the Mike Clark you knew 2 years ago is a much different Mike Clark than exists now, let alone 5 years ago, 10 years ago, so on and so on. So your guests are the same exact way. So if you can figure out a way to kind of unlock that, that's where the magic happens.
That's a really good explanation.
I may have given it a few times.
That's really good. No, yeah. I remember my first guest. I thought that, dude. My first guest I ever did on the podcast. You had him too. It was Houston Alexander. It was my first guest I ever did. And I was like, how can I do something different? And I got him like shaking and almost crying on my first podcast, bro. I fucking... I have a Rodecaster Pro 2, so I can add sound clips on and shit. So I took clips from his Keith Jardine fight, and I was like, I want to walk through that entire time, man, from the time you're in the locker room till the end of the fight. And I had fucking all the announcements from Rogan, and I let it play for like a minute and a half, and then Houston reacted. And then I like played the clip of when Jardine was beating his ass, and then stopped it, dude.
Oh, that's
dude,
awesome.
I fucking got him. And then I played the clip of him knocking out Jardine. So it was like fucking like a 25-minute deal on his podcast. But I was like, the other guys with me, like, why'd you do that? I was like, that's how you got to do something different, man. Like, this is the whole point of this. Nobody wants to hear everybody.
That's exactly
questions,
it.
man.
Like, you know, if I am not going to niche down the content of my show itself, I'm going to at least niche down the moments and like niche down people's individual stories to where the context of their stories are important from the time you press record until the time you stop. So that's an amazing thing that you did with Houston for sure.
It's tough, man. Yeah. And the guests, that's a good way to put it. They have different seasons, and some guests you just skip their season on Netflix.
Right. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Michael, what's next for you, man?
Dude, it's just a lot more. You know, my just to keep going full steam. You know, I think I feel like Caught on the Mic is in like a big growth season, just to add to what we just talked about. I feel like the cadence of the show after we got past episode 100 started to change a little bit. My initial goal when starting the podcast was I want to establish a cast of characters and eventually have those characters back and get a little bit deeper into their stories. And I think I'm kind of easing into that more right now. It's the same content I've always done, you know, fighters, musicians, comedians, paranormal experts, people that are just interesting people. Like I said, everybody's got a very unique story. My line typically is, you are an individual, so is everybody else. I want to keep telling those stories, but now I kind of want to revisit and like grab somebody that's been on the show before and bring them on now and grow the show that way while I'm adding in guests like Ryan Key. I'm working a lot more with publicists, and I have been probably for the past 4 or 5 months. And so I think that's going to help grow the show. As far as what people can expect from Caught on the Mic is, my offering is to a positive social discourse in this world that is constantly trying to divide us. And that's through reconciliation, making amends for maybe past versions of myself that I haven't been proud of through these great guests that I've had on the show, and projection, you know, offering that sense of optimism into this world. So to answer your question after that long tirade of word vomit there, you know, I just want to keep doing it and do it better. Like I said, I'm focusing on the process and not so much on the end goal.
Damn, man. Congratulations, dude. That's awesome. You've been going for what's year
Thank
4,
you. Thank you very much.
It's exciting. He's grown a lot from following him from his band days all the way to his podcast, Caught on the Mic. Michael Clark, thank you so much for joining The Good Life, man. Respect.
Thank you guys for having me. This has been a pleasure. I hope we get to work together again in the future.